ever since the suicide of Dan Markinson, when he was a part of the University of Minnesota Psychiatry Department, that many people in this state have paid attention to this, but no one has paid closer attention to this story and a potential cover-up, in his view, and ethical lapses, in his view and the view of many others, than former Governor Arne Carlson. The former governor has joined us a number of times on this topic. We reached out to him again when he had a story late last week, and I'll just read you the first two graphs of the Star Tribune story and then bring the former governor in the conversation. An outside review of psychiatric research at the University of Minnesota has found continued ethics lapses, including underqualified staff working with research subjects and a psychiatrist who cut corners on obtaining patient consent. The assessment presented last Thursday, the Board of Regents Audit Committee suggests the U still has not resolved lingering ethical questions that emerged after the 2004 suicide of a young man who participated in a study of psychiatric drugs. Dan Markinson first was in that study in 2003, took his life in 2004. Of course, you had Eric Kaler, who arrived at the University of Minnesota in 2011, but the governor has offered up in multiple outlets, here included, that President Kaler should have been much more involved in this and that he's covered up parts of this, and at times the governor has called for the ouster of Eric Kaler. On this topic and the systematic issues that are facing the University of Minnesota, former Governor Carlson is good enough to join us. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. How are you doing today?
Well, fine, thank you. Fine, thank you.
What was your opinion of the latest report offered up last week through the Board of Regents?
Well, I had several reactions. First of all, I've talked to the consultant about it, and there's a lot more to come. But in 2004, the Board of Regents and the management, which includes the president, was informed by their own internal auditors that they had a hostile work environment in the Department of Psychiatry. Now, this is 2004.
Okay.
In 2014, the legislative auditor observed that it's gotten worse. So much for that high-paid management. So they hired a consultant, and she comes in and she gives them the bad news that their department is essentially in disarray, ethical lapses, and in violation of a number of federal protocols and rules and regulations that govern their operation, and all they did was try to intimidate her. So here's something that's gone on for a minimum, and I mean a minimum, of 11 years.
What should have happened right away, sir, going back to 2004?
Right off the bat, any internal audit report that comes to the Board of Directors, and in this case it's the Board of Regents personally should have taken charge and insisted on a set of standards and a set of expectations that are applied to that department that would measure the improvement that's being made, literally month by month. And they never did that. What the Board of Regents has allowed themselves to become is an appendage of the office of the president. They see themselves as working for the president, not as governing the university.
When did that change?
Well, that's a good question. It may well have been something that's been going in and out for years. We've had some very strong and capable boards, and we've had some absolutely dreadful ones. And right now we have one that I think see themselves as cheerleaders and not as people who are supposed to govern the University of Minnesota and hold management accountable. Nobody is accountable under their system. Absolutely nobody.
Do you believe this covers every single regent, or are there exceptions to this classification?
The only exceptions I might make are the newer ones. I've been in contact with one of the regions, and I've heard some comments by another region, so at least two of the newcomers are inquiring about what in the world is going on. I sent this regent all the materials that I've compiled, plus a letter that goes into the athletic department scandal, and I'm hopeful that he will show some leadership. In that letter, I recommended that everything, particularly the Jan Dugas matter, be referred to the Attorney General. I think it's about time the Attorney General started to review it. Two, I think that portion that pertains to the deceit that has been propagated by the attorneys relative to all these fictional investigations, that go to the Bar Association. Attorneys are supposed to be truthful and keep you out of trouble, not untruthful and get you into trouble. And the third part is that they put together a blue ribbon panel, and I mean independent blue ribbon committee. I specifically mentioned that former Chief Judge Kathleen Blatz be a co-chair along with former Democrat Representative Tom Berg. That way you get a Republican and a Democrat, both very, very talented attorneys. Let me start to review everything that's gone on and have some public hearings on it.
Let me circle back to the Attorney General's office. Have they shown any inclination whatsoever to take a look at any of this?
I'm disappointed in that, specifically because one of the investigations that was alleged by the President and the Board of Regents and the attorneys is that the Office of Attorney General conducted exhaustive investigation into the Markison case when, in fact, they didn't conduct any investigation whatsoever. I think the Attorney General's office had an obligation right then and there to blow the whistle and say, no, this is absolutely false, and more importantly, to check into who wrote that statement. And it was written, actually, by the former chief counsel for the university. I mean, that's stunning.
What part or what specific aspects of President Kaler's actions bother you the most during this entire saga?
I think I would point to three things. One, a surprising lack of curiosity. For a chief CEO, I don't think I've ever run across a leader that had such a lack of curiosity as to what's going on his own ship. And as a result of that, I think he has made all sorts of public comments that are untruthful, designed to mislead and deceive people, and at the same time has allowed an enormous amount of mismanagement.
Can I just jump in right there? Because that's a pretty bold statement. Are you saying that Eric Kaler is knowingly lying about this story?
Well, we know that he propagated what you would call lies. Yes, absolutely. There's no question about it. I mean, how can you go around saying that you had all these thorough investigations when, in fact, they never existed?
And he's doing this why?
Well, I think he would be the person that really should answer that question as to why. What I've outlined in my writings is that when he came to the University of Minnesota, he was fully informed by two members of the faculty that are in that business of all the wrongdoing that has occurred in the Markison case. Instead of meeting with them, he bought right into the propaganda that was being put out by the management team. And the result is he either knowingly or unknowingly participated in a cover-up. But at some point, he did know. And you'll find, by the way, the same thing with this recent revelations in the athletic department.
Okay, let's switch over to that, because certainly when Norwood Teague, when information came to light about what he'd offered up in text, and then, let's just be honest, his dismissal, they allowed him to resign, but then an investigation of what took place and the timing of his hiring, what they should have known, what they didn't know. There are questions about that. The hiring and eventually forcing Norwood Teague to leave, what concerns you most about that?
Well, again, I mentioned in my writings there are three hirings of people who all had problems, if you will, in the area of managing their sexual inclinations, let's put it that way. And it gets one to the vetting process. How can you hire a vice president and not properly vet him when, in fact, any kind of search would have indicated that his behavior of creating a hostile work environment, sex harassment, etc., had gone on with at least two of his prior employments? But yet he hired him. With Teague, he indicated, if my dates are roughly right, in July of 2012, Teague was hired. And at the same time that he was being hired, the Virginia Commonwealth was settling a lawsuit involving Teague for sex harassment. Now, Kaler indicated, well, I didn't know that, so let's assume that's true. But by December of that same year, an employee in the department, the athletic department at the University of Minnesota, was filing a suit, and in that suit, she cited the settlement at Virginia. So at that point, the president knew, the Board of Regents knew, and the whole management staff knew. And what did they do about it? The answer appears to be absolutely nothing.
What should they have done at that point?
My heavens. Well, President Kaler said he was lied to. He said that the questions that Teague was asked, he did not properly respond to, not truthfully respond to. And I suspect he's quite correct. At that point, you make a decision. Do you want this person on your staff or not? I personally would have fired him right off the bat. That's what should have happened. At a minimum, there should have been public hearings at the Board of Regents level as to whether to retain or not. But instead, they just pretended nothing happened, gave him positive evaluations on his employment record, and pay raises.
This is a university that you believe in greatly. That has been clear from...
Chad, this university is a center point of economic development in the state of Minnesota. It is vital to every single citizen.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is there something, sir, that has taken place for too long that systematically we continue to have too many scandals in many aspects of the university, including habitually the athletic department?
Constantly, and I think what has happened is that there's a general feeling, and I think Jan Dugas, as the consultant, really came upon it, and that is the number of silos that are there. People that have been long entrenched at the university have their own self-interest and put their self-interest first and the interest of the university last. And the result is federal rules have been broken, state rules have been broken, university rules have been broken, and the top management team, headed by the president and the Board of Regents, have cast about this environment of indifference. Anything goes. Nobody gets fired. Nobody's accountable.
Would you like to see the governor show some involvement in this?
Yes, I would love that, because the university is so vital. The management system at the University of Minnesota is the highest paid management system that we have in public service in the state of Minnesota, the highest paid. If just a fraction of these scandals had occurred at the county level or city level or school district level, there would have been page one stories, editorials demanding dismissals, etc. Why do we have the lowest standards for those who work for the University of Minnesota when in fact they should be the highest?
Last couple moments here with former Governor Arne Carlson. For you, as I said, as someone who believes in this university, do you think the best way for the university to go forward is for Eric Kaler and every Board of Regent to be replaced and bring in new people?
I would certainly replace the president. I would replace a large part of his management team, and I would certainly replace the bulk of the Board of Regents. I would leave the new members on. They haven't had a chance yet to get their feet fully wet, so I'd leave them alone. But the rest of them absolutely should go, because frankly, they're all involved. One way or the other, they have been willingly and knowingly participating in a cover-up. This is very harmful. We had a tax increase a couple of years ago. And we're asking the people of Minnesota to pay more and more and more, while the University of Minnesota's management system gives us less and less and less.
Is there any realistic scenario you see where this will take place, where President Kaler and the majority of these Board of Regents will be forced out?
Well, the regents, I've already spoke to one regent. No, they're certainly not going to resign, and the president has given no indication of resigning. I think what will happen is that the legislature at some point is going to get curious. And if they don't get curious, I think it's going to spill into this next legislative election as a very, very large issue, because the university is so important to all of us. It needs the best and the brightest guiding us.
Last thing on this, sir. Do you have other prominent, well-recognized individuals in the state who garner a great deal of respect, who are with you on this, who can help drive this story?
Well, that's a very fair question. I think a lot of people have asked questions. I certainly know that. And I think there's a reluctance to believe that the president and the board of regents and the higher-ups in management of a university can be involved in such a tawdry affair, but that happens to be the fact.
I mean, you'll admit it is a bold allegation that you're offering up here.
Well, but consider the actions that these people have and the harm these people have inflicted on others. That was more than bold. It was reckless and harmful. They're hurting not just the reputation of the University of Minnesota, they're hurting the people of Minnesota. You know, bear in mind, newspapers like the Boston Globe, the New York Times, the LA Times have paid attention to this story. Scientists from all over the world have commented on what's going on at the University of Minnesota. Faculty members have vigorously spoken out. So I'm not the one that's standing alone. A lot of people have spoken out. The real problem is this indifference that seems to surround this controversy. And that indifference is going to cause us harm. And by the way, it's not going to go away. The legislative auditor has indicated he's going back into the University of Minnesota and will be coming out with another report. And all he's going to find is that his recommendations that he recommended a year ago have been ignored, and that the situation has frankly gotten worse, not better.
Governor, always appreciate your candor on many issues. Travel safe, and we'll reach out to you soon.
I wish I could bring some more good news. Ask me about the Gopher football team, and I'm more optimistic on that.
We'll reach out to you in a few months. We'll see where we're at. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Former Governor Arne